I always thought I knew my wife. 10 years of marriage, thousands of conversations, shared dreams, and quiet moments that made life feel steady. I never had a reason to doubt her. Until that night. She had just returned from a week-long business trip. I remember standing in the living room as I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My heart did that little leap it always did when she came home. I loved her. No matter how busy life got, no matter how mundane things became, she was my person. The door swung open, and there she was, all smiles, glowing as if she had just come back from the best vacation of her life. "Calvin," she called out, dropping her suitcase and rushing toward me. Her arms wrapped around me, and she smelled different. Not bad, just different. A new perfume, maybe? The thought flickered through my mind, but I pushed it away. She started rambling about how exhausting the trip was, about meetings that dragged on for hours, how the hotel room had terrible Wi-Fi. It was the same kind of chatter she always gave me when she got home. But something was off. Her eyes. I've spent a decade reading them, knowing when she was tired, when she was excited, when she was lying. And right then, something about them didn't sit right. The warmth was there, but there was something else underneath it. Nervous energy? Guilt? I couldn't tell. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she was just tired. Then, as I reached for her suitcase to bring it upstairs, her smile faltered. It was a tiny moment. Asterisk, asterisk, a fraction of a second. Asterisk, asterisk, but I caught it. I unzipped the suitcase, expecting to pull out the usual mix of worn clothes and travel essentials. But inside, I found a mess. Clothes that weren't folded the way she usually packed them, a bottle of wine she never mentioned buying, and an unfamiliar men's hoodie, neatly tucked into the side pocket. I froze. It was one of those moments where your brain doesn't process what you're seeing right away. My fingers ran over the fabric, and that's when I noticed the scent. Cologne. Strong, unfamiliar. Her whole body stiffened. "Oh, that's not mine," she said quickly, reaching for it, panic flickering across her face. "Must have been a mistake at the airport. You know how baggage gets mixed up sometimes." I didn't move. I didn't even respond. I just stared at her. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't just back from a business trip. She was back from something else. And she was terrified that I had figured it out. And just like that, the life I thought I knew started to unravel. I stood there, gripping the hoodie like it was evidence in a case I never wanted to be part of. Calvin Stewart, loyal husband, hardworking man, and now, a man whose reality was slipping right through his fingers. Melissa reached out, attempting to snatch the hoodie from my grasp, but I pulled it back, studying her face. She wasn't just nervous, she was panicking. Her breathing was shallow, her hands clenched at her sides. "Melissa," I said slowly, keeping my voice even, "whose is this?" She let out a forced laugh, too high-pitched to be natural. "Oh, come on, Calvin. It's obviously a mix-up. I must have grabbed the wrong suitcase at the airport. You know how crazy those baggage claims can be." I said nothing, just kept staring at her. My silence was suffocating, and she knew it. Then she started talking, too much. Maybe it belonged to someone in my conference group. I remember one of the guys mentioning losing something. Or maybe it was a gift from the hotel. They sometimes give out complimentary things, right? "I don't know, Calvin. Why does this even matter?" Her voice rose slightly toward the end, that defensive edge creeping in, but I wasn't letting her off that easy. "It matters," I said, my voice steady, "because you're lying." Her expression flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she was debating how to proceed. Like she was calculating. I dropped the hoodie on the couch and crossed my arms. "All right," I said, nodding toward her suitcase. "If this was just a mix-up, then there's nothing to hide, right? Let's go through your stuff. Together." Her eyes widened. "Calvin, that's ridiculous." "Is it?" I took a slow step forward, not in a threatening way, but in a way that let her know I wasn't buying whatever excuse she was scrambling to come up with. "Then let's check." Her breathing hitched. That was all I needed to confirm what I already knew. I turned and unzipped her suitcase the rest of the way, ignoring her frantic protests. The first few layers were what I expected: clothes, toiletries, a half-empty pack of gum. But then, beneath it all, I found what made my stomach turn. A black lace bra, one I had never seen before. A receipt from a luxury hotel. Not the chain she told me her company had booked. A bottle of expensive cologne. Melissa sucked in a sharp breath behind me. And then, the silence. That unbearable, suffocating silence where the truth becomes so obvious that words are meaningless. I turned to look at her, and her face was pale. "Calvin," she started, her voice barely a whisper. But I shook my head. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. I picked up the hotel receipt, scanning the details. The name on the reservation wasn't hers. It was a man's name. Now, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. She hadn't been on a business trip. She had been with someone else. My chest tightened as a wave of emotions hit me all at once. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, heartbreak. I swallowed hard, trying to keep myself steady. Melissa stepped closer, hands shaking. I can explain. I lifted my gaze to hers, and for the first time in 10 years of marriage, I didn't recognize the woman in front of me. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been lying to my face. And now, there was no turning back. I stood there, gripping the hotel receipt between my fingers like it was the last remaining thread of my sanity. My mind was racing, trying to catch up with what my eyes were telling me, but every part of me already knew the truth. Melissa wasn't on a business trip. Melissa wasn't stuck in long meetings or bad hotel Wi-Fi. Melissa was with him, whoever the hell he was. She knew I had her cornered. Her face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she reached for the receipt, as if snatching it away would erase what I had just seen. I didn't let her. I gripped it tighter. "Don't." Her lips parted slightly, panic flashing through her eyes. "Calvin, I swear, I can explain." "Explain what?" My voice was low, steady, but underneath it, I felt something inside me cracking. "Explain how you ended up at the Fairmont Grand Hotel instead of the chain your company booked?" I flicked the receipt at her, watching as it floated to the floor between us. "Or explain how this cologne." I picked up the sleek bottle and turned it over in my hand. "Somehow ended up in your suitcase." Melissa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She had nothing. No quick excuse, no fake confusion. She had been caught. I watched her chest rise and fall as she fought for something, anything, to salvage this moment, to salvage the lie. But there was nothing left to salvage. I turned and walked toward the dining table, gripping the back of one of the chairs. I needed something to hold on to. I needed to steady myself because if I let go, I might fall apart right there in front of her. Behind me, I heard her shaky exhale. "Calvin," she tried again, her voice softer now, more careful. Like I was the one who needed calming down. "It's not what you think." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Then tell me, Melissa," I said, turning to face her. "What exactly am I thinking?" She hesitated. And that hesitation? It was all I needed. I shook my head, gripping the chair tighter. "You know what? Don't. Because I don't want to hear whatever excuse you're about to make up." My voice was eerily calm, but inside, a storm was raging. Melissa took a step forward, reaching for me, but I backed away. I didn't want her touching me. Her face crumbled. "Calvin, please. Let me explain." I scoffed. "Explain? Explain how you packed this lace bra for your business trip?" I motioned toward it, still sitting in her half-unpacked suitcase. "Or maybe you can explain why you're acting like I'm the crazy one for noticing all of this." Her breathing quickened, her hands wringing together. She was unraveling, and I hated that even in this moment, even with every piece of evidence in front of me, a part of me still wanted her to prove me wrong. But she wouldn't, because she couldn't. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and dropped her gaze. "It's complicated," she whispered. I felt my stomach drop. That was it. That was her confession. Not a denial. Not some ridiculous attempt to twist things in her favor. Just that. "It's complicated." I let go of the chair and straightened. "Then make it simple," I said, voice cold. "Who is he?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "What?" I took a step forward. "The man whose name is on that hotel receipt. The man who owns that cologne." I clenched my jaw. "The man you spent your business trip with." Melissa swallowed hard. "Calvin. Say his name." She took a deep breath, eyes darting toward the floor as if avoiding my stare would make this easier. Then, in barely a whisper, she said it. "Landon." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I knew him, not because I had suspected it, but because it made everything real. She had a name for the man she had betrayed me with, which meant this wasn't some mistake. This wasn't some drunken accident or bad decision made in the heat of the moment. This was planned, calculated, real. And suddenly, the house we had built together, the life we had shared, the love I thought was unshakable, it all felt like a cruel joke. Melissa was still speaking, her voice trembling, her words desperate, but I wasn't listening anymore. All I could hear was that name. Landon. 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 I took a step back, shaking my head as the weight of her betrayal crashed down on me. I needed air. I needed space. Because if I stayed here 1 second longer, I might say something I could never take back. And right now, I wasn't sure if I ever wanted to speak to her again. I don't remember walking to the front door. I just remember needing to get out. My body moved before my mind could catch up, like my instincts were in overdrive, pushing me away from the wreckage before I suffocated in it. Melissa was still talking, pleading, making excuses. I heard words like mistake and doesn't mean anything, but my brain refused to process them. The second she said his name, something inside me had cracked wide open. Landon. I gripped the doorknob, my knuckles white. The air in the house suddenly felt too thick, too heavy. Calvin, please, she begged, stepping closer. Can we just talk? Please don't walk away from me like this. I turned my head, just enough to look at her. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted, her hands clasped together in front of her chest like she was praying for me to just listen. I did, and I hated every second of it. Because for the first time in 10 years, I saw her for who she really was. A liar. A coward. A woman who had betrayed me so effortlessly that she actually thought a few desperate words would fix it. I forced out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Talk? I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. What exactly is left to talk about, Melissa? Her lips trembled. I didn't mean for this to happen. I let go of the doorknob, turning to face her fully. You didn't mean to cheat on me? I asked, voice laced with disbelief. That's your excuse? Tears welled up in her eyes. And for the first time, I didn't care. This woman had been my world. I had loved her through everything. Her worst days, her biggest fears, every insecurity she ever whispered to me in the dark. And now? None of it mattered. She shook her head frantically. It's not what you think. I stepped closer, cutting her off. Melissa, let me ask you something, I said, my voice eerily steady. When you were lying in that hotel bed with him, did you think about me at all? She inhaled sharply. I tilted my head. When you packed your bags for this business trip, when you picked out that lingerie, when you made dinner reservations at some expensive restaurant with him, did you ever stop and think about what this would do to me? Her face crumbled. I took another step forward. When you kissed him, when you let him touch you, did you even hesitate? Her lower lip quivered. She looked like she wanted to disappear, like the walls were closing in on her. Good, because that's exactly how I felt. Calvin, she whispered, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of my own words settle over me. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just exhausted. I ran a hand down my face and sighed. You know what? I muttered, shaking my head. I don't even want to hear it. I don't care anymore, Melissa. Her whole body stiffened. And that's when I saw it, true fear. Not fear of losing me. Not fear of what she had done. Fear of what came next. Because she had made her choice. And now? She had to live with it. I turned, grabbed my keys off the table, and walked out the front door without another word. The night air hit me like a slap to the face, cold and sharp, but it wasn't enough to clear my head. Nothing was. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my fingers ached. I could still see the glow from our living room window, still picture Melissa standing there, probably crying, probably panicking about what I was going to do next. I had no idea myself. I could barely think straight. My entire life had shifted in the span of a single night, and now I was just sitting here, drowning in the wreckage, gasping for air. I thought about driving, just picking a direction and going as far as the road would take me. But I had nowhere to go, no one to call, because my home wasn't my home anymore. And my wife? She wasn't my wife anymore. My vision blurred for a second, and I realized I was shaking. Not from anger, not from the cold, but from the sheer weight of it all. The betrayal, the lies, the years I would never get back. I took a deep breath, gripping the wheel even tighter. I had to get a grip. I wasn't the kind of man who broke down. I wasn't the kind of man who let other people take control of his life. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let Melissa's mistake define me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, hovering over names that felt foreign now. Who could I even talk to? Who would even understand? Then, my thumb landed on a name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Nash, a childhood friend. Someone who had been there long before Melissa had entered my life. We had drifted apart over the years, marriage, careers, life. But if there was anyone I could trust to be brutally honest with me, it was him. I hesitated for only a second before hitting call. It rang 3 times before a groggy voice answered. Cal? I let out a shaky breath. Hey, man. A beat of silence. Then, it's been a while. Yeah. My throat tightened. Listen, Nash. I need a place to crash for a bit. That woke him up fast. Wait, what happened? I ran a hand through my hair, staring out at the empty street. Melissa happened. Another pause. Then, sharp understanding. Say no more, Nash said, his voice suddenly firm. Come over. I'll unlock the door. I closed my eyes for a second, relief and heartbreak crashing into me all at once. Thanks, man, I muttered before hanging up. Then, without looking back at the house that no longer felt like mine, I put the car in drive and left. I drove in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The streetlights blurred past me, each one flickering through my windshield, casting shadows across the dashboard. My mind, though, was far from the road. It was still trapped back in that house, in the living room where my entire life had shattered in a matter of minutes. I could still hear Melissa's voice, soft, pleading, desperate. I could still see her face when I told her I didn't care anymore. That moment, that exact moment, had changed something inside me. Because the second I saw true fear in her eyes, I realized what she was afraid of most. She wasn't afraid that she had hurt me. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of consequences. Melissa had spent who knows how long living a double life, weaving a web of deceit, believing that I would never pull on the right thread to unravel everything. And now? Now, her carefully built illusion had collapsed around her. The reality of it all sat heavy in my chest, a dull ache pressing against my ribs as I drove through the darkened streets. The truth was, I didn't even know how long this had been going on. Had she just met Landon on this trip? Or had she been seeing him for months? Years? Had I been sharing a bed with a stranger all this time, completely blind to the signs? I gritted my teeth, anger curling in my gut. No, I wouldn't let myself spiral. Not now. I focused on the road, blinking hard to clear the haze from my vision. Nash's place was about 20 minutes away, but the drive felt endless. Every red light was a chance for my mind to drift back to everything I had just walked away from. And the worst part? I still didn't know what the hell I was supposed to do next. Divorce? That seemed obvious. But was that enough? Melissa had taken 10 years of my life and reduced it to a joke. And now, she thought a few tears and desperate words would make me stay? No. Hell no. This wasn't something you just walk away from without a plan. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. I needed to be smart. I needed to be careful. And more than anything, I needed to make damn sure she didn't get to walk away from this without feeling the weight of what she'd done. The call that changed everything. I was halfway to Nash's place when my phone lit up on the passenger seat. Melissa. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Was she calling to beg? To plead? To twist the knife even deeper? I clenched my jaw and let it ring. But as soon as it stopped, another call came through. Melissa. Again. And then a text. Calvin, please. Please answer. I need to talk to you. I swear it's important. I hesitated. My gut told me to ignore it. To let her sit in the mess she'd made and stew in her own guilt. But something about the way she worded it, I swear it's important, made me pause. Against my better judgment, I grabbed the phone and swiped to answer. Silence. Then, a shaky breath. Calvin. I kept my voice flat. What? She exhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath. I don't know where to start. I gritted my teeth. Then don't. No, please. Please just listen. Her voice cracked. And for the first time, she sounded different. Not just panicked. Not just guilty. But scared. And that threw me off. Melissa, I said slowly, already regretting picking up this call. What do you want? There was a long pause, and then I think someone's been watching me. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. What? I don't know how to explain it, but ever since I got back, I've had this feeling. Her voice wavered. Like someone's been in the house. Like someone's been in our house. I frowned, my heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. What are you talking about? I mean it, Calvin. She sucked in a shaky breath. I thought I was just being paranoid, but when you left, I checked my phone. I stayed silent, waiting. And then she said something that sent a chill straight down my spine. I have pictures on my phone, pictures I didn't take. My breath caught. What kind of pictures? Of me. A lump formed in my throat. Of me sleeping, she whispered. In our bed. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I pulled into an empty parking lot, my hands suddenly icy cold against the steering wheel. Melissa, I said carefully, my voice barely above a whisper. Are you alone right now? Silence. Then, the faintest shuffling sound. No, she breathed. And before I could even process that, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my grip tightening as the call dropped. My entire body went rigid, every muscle locking up as Melissa's final whisper echoed in my head. No. She wasn't alone. And then silence. The line went dead. I sucked in a slow breath, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. My first instinct was to call her back. My second was to not get involved. I mean, after everything? After what she did? She had the audacity to cheat on me, lie to my face, and then expect me to come running when she got spooked? But something about her voice. It wasn't just panic. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. And for all my anger, for all the betrayal that was still burning in my chest, I couldn't ignore that. I stared at the phone, debating for a split second. Then I dialed her number. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. I clenched my jaw and tried again. Nothing. I cursed under my breath, gripping the steering wheel as I ran through my options. If this was some ploy to get me back home, it was a sick one. But what if it wasn't? What if someone really was there? I exhaled hard, trying to think clearly. Was Landon with her? Was this some twisted setup to guilt me into coming back so she could manipulate the situation? The more I thought about it, the more everything felt off. Something wasn't right. And despite every logical part of me telling me to leave her to her own mess, I knew I wouldn't. Because I had lived with this woman for 10 years. And I had never heard her sound like that before. I threw the car into drive and took off. The house that no longer felt like home. I pulled up to the house, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The driveway was empty except for Melissa's car. No signs of anything unusual. But that meant nothing. I killed the engine, sitting there for a moment, scanning the windows. The living room lights were still on, but upstairs? Dark. I stepped out, closing the car door softly behind me. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I approached the front door, listening. No sounds. I tested the handle. Unlocked. I pushed it open, stepping inside, every nerve in my body on high alert. Melissa. No response. The house felt off, like I had stepped into something that didn't belong to me anymore. I moved toward the living room, scanning the space. No Melissa. No signs of struggle. Nothing looked disturbed. The suitcase from earlier was still half unpacked. I turned toward the stairs, and that's when I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible creak from upstairs. My chest tightened. I moved slowly, carefully placing my foot on the first step, then the next, keeping my breathing steady. Halfway up, I heard it again. A shuffle. A breath. Someone was up there. I reached the top of the stairs and turned toward our bedroom, the door slightly ajar. The darkness inside was thick, swallowing the dim hallway light. I stepped forward, pushed the door open, and that's when I saw her. Melissa, curled up in the corner of the room, her knees pulled to her chest, her phone on the floor beside her. Her eyes shot up to meet mine, wide, terrified. She didn't say a word. She just lifted a shaking finger and pointed. And then I saw it. A figure in the shadows. The stranger in the dark. My body went ice cold. Someone else was in the room. I could barely make out the shape, a dark figure standing near the closet, motionless, watching us. I didn't think. I reacted. I lunged for the light switch, flipping it on. The room flooded with harsh white light. And that's when the figure moved. Not toward me. Not toward Melissa. But toward the window. In one swift motion, he threw it open, hoisting himself up like he had done it 100 times before. And then he was gone. Just like that. The sound of his feet landing outside was muffled, followed by silence. I rushed to the window, looking out, but all I saw was darkness. No running footsteps. No car speeding away. Nothing. Like he had never been there at all. Behind me, Melissa let out a shaky sob. I turned back to her, my adrenaline still spiking through my veins. What the hell was that? I demanded. She shook her head frantically. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know, Calvin. I swear, I clenched my jaw, trying to piece it all together. The hoodie. The cologne. The hotel receipt. The phone pictures she didn't take. Melissa, I said slowly, my mind working at a dangerous speed. How long have you been seeing Landon? She swallowed hard. A few months, she admitted, voice small. I never thought it would. I cut her off. Did he ever come here? Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I stepped forward. Melissa, did Landon ever come to this house? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. Jesus Christ. Melissa shook her head. I didn't think it was a big deal. He was just... I held up a hand. Shut up. She flinched, and for the first time all night, I saw true regret on her face. This wasn't just an affair. This was something worse. Someone had been in our house, watching. And if it wasn't Landon, then who the hell was it? I stood there, staring at Melissa, heart hammering in my chest. Everything had shifted. Everything. Her affair? That was one thing. But now? Now there was something else at play. Someone had been in our house, watching. I took a slow, deep breath, my mind racing. Melissa, I said, voice low, steady, demanding. Tell me, did Landon ever come here? She hesitated again, and that hesitation told me everything. My stomach turned. How many times? I pressed, stepping closer. How many times has he been in my house, Melissa? Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. A few. I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. Unbelievable. She had been bringing him here. Into our home. The home I paid for. The home where I built my life. The home where I had loved her. Something inside me shifted. A final, irreversible snap. I was done. Done feeling betrayed. Done feeling hurt. Done feeling like a fool. Because at that moment, something finally hit me, something I should have realized from the start. Melissa was not my problem anymore. I straightened, feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. All right, I said simply, voice eerily calm. Melissa blinked. What? I gestured around the room. This mess? It's yours now. Her face fell. I don't care about Landon, I continued. I don't care how long this has been going on. I don't care about your lies, your guilt, or whatever excuse you're about to throw at me. I exhaled slowly. Because I'm done. Tears spilled over onto her cheeks. Calvin, please. I laughed. Actually laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. No, Melissa. You don't get to please me anymore. I turned toward the door, my heart beating lighter, freer than it had in weeks. Where are you going? She asked, voice desperate. I glanced over my shoulder. To start my life. Her expression crumbled. Calvin. But I didn't wait. I walked out, leaving her in the mess she created. Rebuilding from the ashes. I stayed at Nash's place that night. We sat on his back porch with a couple of beers, staring at the stars like we used to when we were kids. You know what the best part is? I said after a long sip. Nash smirked. You're finally free? I grinned. Hell yes. And I was. Over the next few months, everything changed. The divorce? Quick and painless. Turns out, Melissa's affair was easy to prove. The house? Sold. I took my share of the money and moved into a place that was truly mine. Melissa? Landon didn't stick around. Turns out, mistresses don't make great wives. She tried to contact me, apologizing, begging for another chance. I never responded. Instead, I focused on me. I went to the gym. I traveled. I spent time with friends I had neglected during my marriage. I rediscovered myself. And then, one day, I met someone new. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't some fairy tale. But it was real. And real was all I ever wanted. Final words. Looking back, I realize now Melissa's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because she didn't just break my heart. She set me free. And that was the best revenge of all.